April 10th, 1940, 4:14 a.m. Narvik Fjord, northern Norway. Snow falls in slow, silent flakes over a black, frozen sea. The mountains on either side rise like pale, jagged walls, turning the fjord into a narrow corridor where sound vanishes almost instantly. And in that stillness, so quiet you can hear your own breath, a single British destroyer slices through the darkness at full speed. Her name, HMS Hardy. Her commander, Captain Bernard Warburton-Lee. And in the next few minutes, he will attempt something every naval textbook calls suicide. The deck trembles beneath the boots of his crew as Hardy pushes past 30 knots. Men rub frost from their eyebrows, breath spilling from their mouths like smoke. Someone mutters, "If they spot us, sir, 10 destroy us." Another voice whispers back, "Shh, he knows." Captain Warburton-Lee stands on the bridge, collar stiff with ice, binoculars pressed to his eyes. He sees nothing ahead, just darkness, falling snow, and the faint, ghostly outline of the fjord curving left. But he knows what's waiting around that bend. 10 German destroyers, most of them anchored, their crews asleep, ammunition lockers closed, steam boilers cooling. The Kriegsmarine believed the British were too far away, too confused, too late to strike back after the German landings at Narvik. They were wrong. Warburton-Lee lowers his binoculars and says quietly, "Hold course." Not a shout, not a bark. Just a steady command from a man who already made peace with the gods of chance. You can almost feel it. The cold wind cutting across the bow, the vibration of the engines, the anticipation pressing down on every sailor's shoulders. This isn't bravery, it's something sharper, something reckless, but necessary. Back in London, the Admiralty had warned him, "Your force is too small. 10 destroyers is too many. Wait for reinforcements." But the Germans were offloading troops and ammunition. Every minute mattered. Every delay strengthened the invasion. So Warburton-Lee didn't wait. He sailed through a blizzard, into a fjord the enemy controlled, against a fleet 10 times stronger. And now, here, minutes before dawn breaks, he whispers the words that will echo through the rest of the battle. "Prepare for torpedo attack." The crew snaps into motion. Torpedo tubes swivel. Gun crews load shells with hands numb from the cold. A signalman wipes frost from the lamp lenses. The ship feels alive, like a beast waking just before the hunt. Hardy isn't alone. 4 more British destroyers follow. HMS Havoc, Hotspur, Hostel, and Hunter. But Hardy, by orders and by courage, leads the charge. The fjord grows narrower. Any movement from either shore echoes like distant thunder. Somewhere ahead, beyond the curtain of snow, German destroyers sit quietly at Narvik Harbor, crews sleeping, officers unaware. The invasion of Norway still unfolding without fear of interruption. On the German flagship Wilhelm Heidkamp, Captain Fritz Hintze is asleep in his quarters. On Der von Reuter, Captain Eric Bay is reviewing reports from the previous day, confident that no British warship would dare enter the fjord before daylight. But daylight comes early in Norway, and with it, death travels fast. At 4:21, the first faint outlines of Narvik's harbor appear through the snow, shadowy shapes, masts protruding from darkness. The Germans, all of them. A petty officer aboard Hardy's bridge breathes, "My God, they're right there." Warburton-Lee's response is calm, almost soft. "Signal the squadron. Action stations." A shrill alarm pierces the ship. Men sprint to guns, clip ammunition belts, pull heavy handles into place. Forward guns depress. Torpedo crews stand ready. Hardy's engines roar. The distance closes. 1,500 yards. 1,200. 900. The Germans still haven't noticed. A single flicker of light appears on one destroyer's deck. Maybe a cigarette. Maybe someone wiping snow from a hatch. But it's too late. "Fire torpedoes!" Warburton-Lee shouts. The tubes erupt with a violent hiss. White trails streak across the dark water. Seconds later, boom. A column of fire erupts from Wilhelm Heidkamp. Her magazine detonates. An explosion so vast, it lights the snowflakes gold. Shock waves echo across the fjord like distant thunder rolling between mountains. German sailors scream, stumble, fall into icy water. Then a second explosion. Another German destroyer crippled. Chaos crashes through the harbor like a tidal wave. Inside Narvik, local residents jolt awake as the sky flashes orange. Windows rattle, dogs bark. Snow slides from rooftops. On Der von Reuter, Captain Eric Bay rushes to the bridge, half-dressed, yelling for his crew to return fire. But through his binoculars, he sees the impossible. One British destroyer charging directly at an entire German fleet. He stares, stunned, unable to believe what he's witnessing. Who attacks 10 ships with one? Warburton-Lee does, and he's not finished. Not even close. As Hardy surges deeper into the harbor, German captains scramble to react, starting engines, opening ammunition lockers, shouting orders through panic and smoke. One thought races through every German mind. If this is the lead ship, how many more are coming? Behind Hardy, the other British destroyers enter the fjord like shadows, slipping through fire and snow. The battle for Narvik has begun. But the moment Hardy turns to withdraw, just as the British believe they've pulled off the impossible, a new threat appears in the swirling dawn light. German destroyers racing in from deeper inside the fjord. 10 minutes from now, both sides will collide in a narrow channel with no room to maneuver. And someone is about to pay for Warburton-Lee's gamble. 4:38 a.m. The fjord is no longer silent. It roars. Gunfire crackles across the water, ricocheting between ice-coated mountains like metallic lightning. Flames from the burning Wilhelm Heidkamp dance against the snow, turning the harbor into a surreal hellscape of orange and white. And through that chaos, HMS Hardy charges forward, turning sharply to avoid the wreckage just created. You can almost feel the deck lurch beneath your feet. The smell of cordite mixed with cold sea air, the sting of wind and smoke in your eyes. Warburton-Lee watches the inferno behind him, but doesn't slow. In fact, he accelerates. His voice cuts through the bridge. Helm, come right. Prepare to engage secondary targets. The crew knows what that means. The attack isn't over. He's going deeper. But as Hardy emerges from the cloud of steam and smoke, a new shape materializes in the dim morning light. Long, dark, and fast. Not one, not two. 3 German destroyers, steaming straight toward the British column from the inner fjord. A lookout shouts, "Enemy ships, dead ahead." This is the moment every British sailor feared. The Germans, who had been unloading troops overnight, ships like Erich Kollner, Wolfgang Zenker, and Hans Ludemann are returning, fully alert, fully armed, and already at flank speed. They know the fjord, they know the terrain, and worst of all, they know where the British must pass to escape. A narrow choke point where maneuvering is almost impossible. Warburton-Lee sees them instantly. Hardy is heading straight into a knife fight. He doesn't panic. He doesn't hesitate. Instead, he says with icy clarity, "Very well, we press on." Behind him, the other British destroyers, Hunter, Hotspur, Havoc, Hostile, struggle to adjust formation in the confined water. Snow whips across their decks. Turrets jam, then clear. Boilers push to maximum pressure. The fjord becomes a tunnel of fire. 4:42 a.m. The German destroyer, Hans Ludemann, opens fire first. A streak of muzzle flash splits the darkness. Moments later, shells crash into the water yards from Hardy's bow. Spray blasts across the deck. Men duck instinctively. Warburton-Lee stays upright, gripping the railing so hard his gloves tighten around the metal. "Guns, open fire!" Hardy's forward 4.7-inch guns answer with savage force, their thunder rolling up the sides of the fjord. Hot brass shells clatter across the deck. The ship vibrates with each blast. German ships weave, trying to spoil British targeting. But the fjord works against them, too. There's nowhere to hide. One direct hit slams into a German destroyer's superstructure. Sparks, metal shards, a flash of fire. But then a disaster. A violent crunch shudders through Hardy's hull. A German shell has struck the forward gun mount. 2 men are thrown backwards. Smoke pours from the shattered housing. The gun falls silent. Warburton-Lee doesn't flinch. "Shift to rear guns. Maintain rate of fire." You can almost hear it. The desperation, the discipline, the sheer adrenaline that keeps the crew moving even as ice, smoke, and explosions tear at them. The battle now becomes a race. Who can fire faster? Who can turn quicker? Who can stay afloat long enough to escape this icy death corridor? But the Germans sense something the British don't. Something far more dangerous than the ships ahead. Reinforcements. More German destroyers, ships that avoided the earlier attack, are rushing toward the battle from the inner fjord. Their wakes carve white trails across the dark sea, and Hardy, still recovering from damage, is caught in the center. On the bridge of the German destroyer Dieter von Roeder, Captain Erich Bay grips his binoculars with white-knuckled force. Smoke curls around him. His voice is low, tense, disbelieving. "Eine gegen Zen." He charged alone, but disbelief fades. Tactical instinct takes over. He turns to his officers. Cut off their retreat. Drive them back into the harbor. Do not let them escape. The Germans shift formation. One group moves to block the rear. Another closes from the front. Crossfire begins. The fjord becomes a funnel of exploding water and screaming steel. Hardy takes another hit, this one slamming into the bridge. Glass shatters. A signalman drops. Warburton-Lee wipes blood from his cheek, steps over debris, and shouts again. All ships, follow Hardy through! But Hunter, behind him, struggles to keep formation. A German shell rips open her port side, water flooding in. She veers off course, smoke billowing from her funnels. The British line is unraveling. And now, emerging through the smoke, German destroyer Georg Thiele accelerates toward Hardy like a charging predator. Guns blazing, bow cutting through icy waves. Her captain sees an opportunity, a deadly one, close range, point blank. Hardy is seconds away from the most brutal moment of the battle, and Captain Warburton-Lee, battle-worn, bleeding, still commanding with steel in his voice, must decide whether to break away or hold position and risk everything. He chooses the only option he believes in, the bold one, the impossible one. He orders Hardy to turn directly toward the German line. A final charge, a head-on duel at knife range, the kind no one survives. 4:49 a.m. The fjord narrows again, steep cliffs rising on both sides, their icy faces glowing dimly in the firelight. Hardy surges forward, engines screaming, water foaming violently along her hull. Every man aboard knows what the captain has chosen, and yet no one questions it. A British destroyer is about to duel a German destroyer at point-blank range. You can almost feel the terror and the resolve. Ahead, Georg Thiele charges straight toward Hardy, bow on, guns already cycling at maximum speed. Her captain, Max Eckhart Wolf, sees the British ship turning to face him and mutters in disbelief, komme direkt auf uns zu. He's coming straight at us. German gunners lower their barrels, down, further down, because the ships are now so close that their usual firing angles are useless. Hardy's bridge shakes violently as an incoming shell smashes into the deck, inches from the forward funnel. The blast throws men to the floor. A fire ignites and dies instantly in the freezing wind. Warburton-Lee grips the railing, shouting through the chaos. Return fire! Hardy's starboard guns erupt, flames spitting sideways across the fjord. The recoil shakes the ship like a living creature. Shells streak toward Georg's tail and slam into her superstructure, one tearing open plating, another sending German sailors diving for cover. The German destroyer replies instantly, point blank. No mercy. A shell smashes into Hardy's bridge. The world turns white. Shards of steel scream through the air. Smoke fills the compartment. The blast throws men backwards like rag dolls in a hurricane of fire and splintered metal. Someone shouts for the medic, someone else for the captain. Warburton-Lee doesn't move at first. Then a twitch, a breath. Blood streaks across his face. His coat is torn, but he forces himself upright, bracing against the shattered window frame. His voice, cracked but unmistakably firm, cuts through the smoke. Signal, continue the attack. Those around him stare, some with awe, some with fear, all with the unshakable certainty that their captain is about to die and still refuses to yield. Below decks, Hardy's engine crews work blindly, surrounded by steam leaks and falling debris. One man wipes soot from his eyes, another shoves a wrench into place with trembling hands as water pools at their boots. The ship is bleeding, groaning, burning, and still she fights. 4:52 a.m. The distance between Hardy and Georg Thiele collapses to less than 800 yards. In naval combat, that is suicidal range, knife distance in a gunfight meant for kilometers. German shells rake Hardy from bow to stern. A direct hit tears open her hull near the waterline. Cold seawater floods in, mixing with smoke and oil. The deck tilts slightly, just enough for every sailor aboard to feel it in their stomach. Hardy answers with everything she has left. Her gunners fire faster than they ever trained. Hot shells rain around their feet. Smoke makes the air taste metallic, choking. Every shot is a desperate attempt to cripple Georg's tail before Hardy dies. Some shots hit, some miss. Some tear into the mountainside in huge, echoing bursts. The fjord becomes a glowing corridor of explosions. Behind Hardy, Hunter attempts to close the gap, but a German volley cripples her steering gear. She lists sharply, drifting out of formation. Hotspur nearly collides with her, trying to avoid wreckage. The British squadron is falling apart. Warburton-Lee sees it. He knows Hardy is no longer leading a coordinated attack. She's buying time, drawing fire, sacrificing herself so the others might break free. Another German destroyer, Wolfgang Zenker, enters the fight, adding her guns to the onslaught. Hardy's hull is now riddled with holes. Fires rage along her port side. A lookout yells, "We can't take another hit like that." He's right. Hardy is seconds from annihilation. Then a single German shell screams in from the left. A perfect shot. It slams directly into the bridge. The blast hits like a collapsing universe. Panels rip away. Glass explodes outward. The world becomes smoke and silence and violent wind. Captain Bernard Warburton-Lee collapses at the center of the chaos, thrown against a shattered bulkhead. For a moment, the world slows. He blinks once, twice, then tries to speak. The surviving officers bend over him, hearing only fragments. Tell them. Good luck. His voice weakens. Continue the action. And then the man who charged into a fjord against 10 destroyers. The man who defied every tactical rule. The man whose courage stunned both sides. Falls still. The bridge crew hesitates, just for a heartbeat. Then duty kicks in. With their captain dying at their feet, they fight harder. But fate is closing in. Hardy's engines sputter. Her stern dips lower. The fires grow. The fjord tightens. And a final German salvo is already on its way. 4:57 M. The world tilts. Hardy's bow rises sharply, her stern dipping lower into the freezing black water rushing in through the torn hull. The ship groans, a deep metallic death cry that echoes up the cliffs like some wounded animal refusing to fall. On the shattered bridge, smoke swirls around broken glass and twisted steel. The cold wind whips through the open wounds of the ship, extinguishing fires and exposing the wreckage in brutal detail. The officers who survived the last blast dragged themselves upright, coughing, bleeding, but still in the fight. Below them, the men on deck cling to lifelines as Hardy lists harder to port. Waves crash over the forward gun mount. Shell casing roll across the tilted deck like marbles. The order finally comes. Abandon ship. Abandon ship. It feels unreal, unthinkable, but there is no alternative. Another German volley erupts from Georg Thiele and Wolfgang Zenker, smashing into Hardy's stern. Wood splinters, steel folds, a lifeboat is sheared in half before it even hits the water. Yet the British destroyer still refuses to stop. Hardy's remaining guns fire one last time, angry, defiant, echoing off the mountains like a final act of rebellion. One shell hits Georg Thiele again, ripping into her forward section. Another splashes wide. A third detonates on the rocky shore in a violent blossom of snow and flame. The Germans can hardly believe it. A crippled destroyer sinking by the stern, her captain dead, still firing, still fighting. On the bridge of Georg Thiele, Captain Wolf squints through the smoke and mutters, almost with respect, "Sie gibt nicht auf." She will not give up. 5 a.m. Hardy's engines fail completely. She slows, and then her bow swings uncontrollably toward the shore. The crew below decks can hear water roaring through ruptured compartments, swallowing rooms in seconds. Men wade waist deep, pulling each other toward escape hatches. Some remove their heavy gear, knowing that if they fall into the fjord wave down, they'll never surface again. On the upper deck, officers try to keep order, but panic fights its way through the ranks. The fjord water is just above freezing. Anyone who jumps in has minutes before hypothermia shuts them down. And still, the Germans keep firing. Hardy takes another direct hit. The blast throws men overboard and rips open new wounds in the hull. Smoke pours upward in thick black sheets. Warburton-Lee's body lies at the side of the bridge, wrapped hastily in a coat. His officers avert their eyes as they continue the evacuation. There is a sense, raw, crushing, that they're leaving more than a ship behind. They're leaving a legend created in a single, impossible hour. As Hardy drifts toward a small, rocky shoreline, the order echoes again across the deck. Jump! Swim for the beach! One by one, men leap into water so cold it cuts like knives. They gasp involuntarily, limbs stiffening, lungs burning. Some struggle toward shore. Others cling to floating debris. Behind them, Hardy is dying quickly. Her stern sinks deeper. Her bow lifts higher. Water pours over the quarterdeck. Her mast leans at a sickening angle. And then, with a final shuddering groan, she runs aground on the rocky edge of Vidrick Bay. It's not graceful. It's violent. The hull grinds against stone, tearing open even further. Water floods everything. The Germans cease fire, watching through binoculars as the British sailors scramble onto the snow-covered rocks. Some collapse instantly, shivering uncontrollably. Others stare back at their broken ship with a mixture of grief and disbelief. But the battle is far from over, because the other British destroyers, Hotspur, Havoc, and Hostile, are still fighting their way back down the fjord, shells bursting around them. And the Germans are giving chase. More destroyers form behind Georg Thiele and Wolfgang Zenker. Reinforcements close in. The fjord is a funnel, and the remaining British ships are trapped inside it. Hardy may be aground. Her crew may be scattered across the icy shoreline. But the German force is now turning its full fury onto the rest of the British squadron. And the next minutes will decide whether any of them escape the fjord alive.